I must welcome everybody here tonight. It's lovely to see a gallery, and it's lovely to see passionate people with us tonight that want to raise matters to Council's attention, and I really thank you for taking the time to be with us. Before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the Ngadjuri people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. And it's the oldest living culture on earth. I call for apologies. We do have one from Councillor Mark Frankham. Are there any further apologies? If not, we'll move to confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held the 28th of September to be confirmed. Would someone like to move that they be a true and correct record of that meeting? Councillor Jason, someone like to second that? Councillor Bill, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. Into communications. We've had a busy time of it in the last week or so. Raised from the deathbed of the last council meeting and able to get back out and get amongst some of the action that's been happening in our exciting region. Let me find my place. Probably one of the most exciting things that's probably happened to our council happened last Wednesday night, where the local government Institute of Technology, South Australian Institute of Technology awards were presented in Adelaide, and Light Regional Council were highly successful on that evening. I might hand over to June to relay exactly what happened on that evening and how proud we are of our council staff. So thank you, June.
Thank you, Mayor Bill, through the chair. I could just advise the elected members that Light Regional Council submitted 2 nominations, one for excellence in employee engagement and one for excellence in information management. And we were successful in both categories. Out of all nominees and councils in the state. And then we went on to win the the South Australian Achievement of the Year Award as the overall winner of the event. So it was a local government information management awards for the year. I'd really like to just thank and acknowledge the input and drive that to make this achievement possible. That was Lara Matters, who's the information manager for Light Regional Council and really is making inroads into implementing innovative ideas and strategies in this area. Look, also I'd like to acknowledge Tara Kneebone, Carrie Rainsford and the records management team for the part they played as well. A lot of hard work went into it. I'd like to show you just a very short YouTube video that was part of our nomination, and it is regarding a change to our records management system. So moving away from an off-the-shelf product more and developing our own, reducing our the cost to council around $40,000 a year. So it won't take long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, June. And as you can see, I've got one very proud mayor, and I think I've got one very proud council. Great effort. Enderby Road, what an achievement that's been. With a very generous federal government grant, we were able to leverage funds from Enderby Station itself and using our own funds to minimise the remaining 9 kilometres of road from the Chile Highway to historic Enderby Station, which now almost completes what we've called our Drovers Way from the Gomersall Road right through to the top of Enderby Station, which will be our Drovers Way. We've got a little bit more to do on Gerald Roberts Road to the end, and that will be completed hopefully early in the new year. So what a wonderful journey that's going to be, and it's so exciting that that on the weekend following the opening of that road, they had the open gardens at Enderby, and on the Saturday they had 1,200 people. On the Sunday they had 2,500 people. So it's opened up that whole area for our tourism and so forth, and it's really a jewel in the crown. So we're very proud of that, and I thank the council staff and so forth that made that happen. They got the grant in the first place, and Richard Dodson was very, very good at getting grants with our council and managing them, of course, and the other council staff also that were involved. But plenty of publicity for council on that in that respect, and certainly a great credit to Enderby and what they've done out there as well in restoring that wonderful historic property. Also had the good fortune of attending Tony Piccolo's Tour de Light, which he undertakes each year, the local member for Light, Tony Piccolo. He gathers around a group of people and takes them in various parts of his Light electorate, which includes parts of our council region. I did have Councillor Zella and Councillor Close on board as well, which was great to see, and I'm sure we all got something out of that. I think it's important for getting the colour of anyone's tie, but Tony Piccolo works very, very hard for his constituents and his people, and he's been extremely diligent with this council also over the years, and we're very happy that he's there. Peter Malinauskas was one of the guests on that trip, and it was a great opportunity to have a close engagement with Peter. And I did say to him at one stage, I said, Peter, I think that we would probably be one of the most progressive councils in the state. And his comment back to me was, yes, I've heard that from a few sources. So I think it gives you great confidence to know that there's people out there that do think Light Regional Council is up there with the best of the councils in the state. And I think our track record proves that. Also, I did attend the AGM of the Regional Development Australia, Barossa, Adelaide Plains, Light, etc. I've got to say, it was an excellent meeting, very well conducted. The new chair, Rolf Binder, I think he's heading in the right direction with this group. Very important to our region, the Regional Development Australia, and in supporting major projects and other matters. We're well represented on that board by Kyron Chappell, and I think we've got a lot to look forward to. I did also have a lot of engagement with the Kapunda High School students. It's becoming quite regular. They really test this old fella out with the questions that they ask, and all relevant, all sometimes a little bit tricky for an old timer like me to be talking about artificial intelligence and all of these matters. But these are the things that our young people are engaged with now, and they want to know what council's view is on some of these matters, what we think of Islam, all of these things, things that we've probably not ever been discussed in our chamber, but opens your eyes very much to young people's thinking. So I'm going to keep that relationship going as strong as I can. Also, the Carnival of Cups in Gawler, the 3 racing codes came together, the greyhounds, the harness racing and the gallops. Gawler and our council region, of course, are very rich in horse racing and dog racing also. And in fact, it surprised me very much just how big the dog racing industry is. In fact, it's a bigger industry than the harness racing. which very much surprised me, but it is. And of course, the Gawler racetrack is something that that area there can be very proud of. It's an excellent venue for not just horse racing, for other functions as well. So I had an interesting time of it, and one that I was very pleased to be able to get out there and be part of our community. Council, is there any other council members who would like to report on any communications? Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. On Sunday, I attended the opening of the Allendale North community shed that they built on the tennis courts, and you may recall that we contributed $10,000 towards that, and the $60,000 project, they raised the rest in cash and kind, and it was a very successful event with lots of people present. And they did say that they've been getting lots of inquiries from other groups outside of Allendale to use that facility. So I think it's turned out to be a very worthwhile initiative that came about really when council decided they might sell the land, and people realised how important a parcel of land that was, and took up the challenge and developed into something really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Any further comments? Councillor Simon.
Thanks. I signed up to join the Beyond the Curb waste and recycling tour that was offered by CARESUP, and I think it was funded by Light Regional Council. And I was going to take my wife and my daughter along, because I think it's very important for, especially for young people, to understand what happens with waste and what's going on and all that. However, about 2 days before the tour was meant to happen, I got a call from Brian from CARESUP, and he cancelled the tour because we were the only ones, the three of us were the only ones that signed up for it. And I was obviously a bit disappointed about this, and I asked, so how did you promote this tour and all that sort of stuff? And they said they promoted it through their channels, but it was promoted through a council's, I think, Facebook account. And yeah, but I just think it's a bit disappointing that nobody would sign up for like a free tour to understand what happens with our waste and our recycling. And I was just wondering if there's something we can do about it to get more people, excited about that and joining these sort of things.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Simon. Is there anything we can do about that, or we just have to leave it to now and see what happens?
Maybe promote it better on our web page, or make an ad in the Bonnet and the Leader and those sort of things, and just promote it better. I'm not sure.
Well, thanks for bringing it to our attention, Councillor Simon. And we move on now to petitions, which we have no petitions. We do have 2 deputations tonight. And the first deputation is from Grant and Kathy Wills, very dear friends who I know are quite passionate about this Barossa Valley and in particular the Marananga region, and they have every right to be. It's a beautiful part of the world, and it's nice to see people who are passionate, who are prepared to stand up and let us know what's happening in their region in all sorts of different ways, whether they be planning matters or behavioural matters or anything else. And so we welcome you tonight. Thanks, Kathy and Grant, for your presentations. If you don't mind, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bill and elected members, and Brian and council staff. My husband Grant Wills and I are really appreciative of the opportunity to make a deputation to council, and thank you for the time on the agenda today. We're presenting to you as residents of the Western Barossa and constituents of Light Regional Council, and I would like to acknowledge the numbers of community members attending tonight's meeting in support or actually viewing online this evening. I'd like to start by thanking Council for its investment to date in the Western Barossa, evidenced by numbers of areas such as infrastructure investment in road resurfacing in key arterial routes, purchase of 7 hectares of pristine Western Barossa bushland on Leabick Road, engagement with the business community through attendance at monthly Seppeltswood Road Business Alliance meetings. Our deputation is twofold. Firstly, to request Light Regional Council to engage in comprehensive community consultation with the residents of the Western Barossa communities of Marananga and Seppeltsfield to jointly develop planning policy overlays under the new Planning and Design Code to specifically protect the character of our region. Secondly, we'd like to request Light Regional Council, to increase the transparency of the vision that it has for the hamlets of Marananga and Seppeltsfield, and to present this vision to the residents of these communities in a series of public meetings for input and engagement. For some context, we would hope that all elected members and council staff are aware of the extraordinary part of the Barossa Wine GI that Light Regional Council has custodianship of. Perhaps for those less familiar with the Western Barossa, the hamlets of Marananga and Seppeltsfield are linked by the iconic Avenue of Palms along Seppeltsfield Road, which winds its way along vineyards, cellar doors and historic sites. The gleaming spire of Marananga Church, Gnadenfrei, is framed by vineyard and is an iconic image captured by hundreds, if not thousands, of guests to the region and used as a hero image to promote the Barossa by key destination marketers. The hamlet of Seppeltsfield is equally picturesque and home to the historically significant Seppeltsfield wines and its recently reinvigorated tourism precinct. The wide open spaces, the vistas of vineyard, crop and natural bush, and the idyllic rural character make this a breathtakingly beautiful area to visit, as Mayor refers to, or reside in. Light Regional Council proudly claims custodianship of approximately half of the Barossa Wine GI. Our question is, what tangible action will Council make to protect this extraordinary piece of South Australia? Recent development proposals have highlighted the great appeal of the Western Barossa for developers and also the great vulnerability. We note the proposed Oscar Hotel at Seppeltsfield Winery with a current 12-storey, 50-metre design that is entirely incongruent with a tiny rural hamlet and threatens to materially change the character of the Western Barossa if approved in its current form. We note the proposed Paradigm Marananga development with a current level of scale that is entirely inappropriate for a village with 21 houses and 50 residents. The request for a 200-person function centre, a 75-person cellar door, and 35 functions per year ending at midnight is completely disproportionate for a village environment. And as you will remember, was the catalyst for the recent email that Grant and I wrote to each of you as elected members requesting community consultation and protection as yet another development threatens the character of our region. We foresee the strong likelihood of further developments being proposed to leverage the great appeal of the Western Barossa, and we are looking to Light Regional Council to take up its custodian role to ensure that the most important aspects of our landscape, natural character and heritage are protected for generations to come. It is vitally important that our elected members, you, who have stewardship of this region for this period of time, have a long-range view and seek to prevent short-sighted developments that will end up killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Under the previous planning code, there were policy areas that provided protection, assuming that developments are assessed according to the code with transparency and consistency. We strongly recommend that Light Regional Council demonstrate its commitment to the Western Barossa by taking priority action to advocate for the creation of additional planning policy layers under the Planning and Design Code, and also to advocate for the strengthening of the Character Preservation Barossa Valley Act 2012. We do appreciate that there will always be a tension between the desire for development and the need for protection of character and natural heritage, and we request that Light Regional Council take the necessary leadership to provide a strong policy framework to ensure that all future development in the Western Barossa is sympathetic. Specifically, we are asking you to engage with local residents, not just with the business community. We recommend a series of community meetings in Marananga and Seppeltsfield to listen to residents and understand their strong desires for the preservation of the character of our region. Numerous residents are 5th or 6th generation Barossans and carry a deep generational sense of the character of the Barossa and a passion to preserve this. Secondly, we are very concerned with the lack of specific policy under the new Planning and Design Code, and we request Light Regional Council to advocate and lobby for the Barossa to be declared as a character area with specific principles that protect and respect the unique character of this iconic region. Additionally, we're asking you to advocate and lobby for the reintroduction of local policy content that has been removed in the new Planning and Design Code. For instance, similar to local policy like the former Seppeltsfield Winery Policy Area 5, or the Marinanga Township Fringe Policy Area 6. The absence of this specific local policy content leaves our Western Barossa communities in an extremely vulnerable position in regard to future development. Thirdly, for Light Regional Council to take up the option to create a local design review panel through the Office for Design and Architecture SA, ODASA, to provide independent design advice via the review of the design quality of a development proposal prior to being lodged for assessment. And fourthly, a big list for you. We asked Light Regional Council to proactively provide input into the Character Preservation Barossa Valley Act 2012 with broad community consultation to strengthen rather than weaken this remarkable Act of Parliament. Elected members would be aware of the objects of this Act: to recognise, protect and enhance the special character of the district, to ensure that activities that are unacceptable in view of their adverse effects on the special character of the district are prevented from proceeding, to ensure that future development does not detract from the special character of the district. In strengthening this Act, it should provide a clearer definition of what the character of the Barossa is and what it is not. That definition should be clear enough that a developer or an architect should never even consider lodging an application for a development such as the Oscar in its current design form, as the definition should clearly identify issues of height and scale that protect the region's character. We would like to note that it is deeply concerning for the residents of the Western Barossa that Light Regional Council identifies the Character Preservation Act as a threat in the SWOT analysis in the LRC's Economic Development Plan. It's extremely difficult for me personally to understand, as a resident and a generational Barossan, how my council could in any way deem this vital piece of legislation a threat. So we're appealing to Light Regional Council today to lobby for the strengthening of this Act, rather than citing this legislation as a threat. In closing, we would like to underscore the significant community unrest that currently exists in the Western Barossa in regard to Light Regional Council. And I acknowledge it may or may not be valid. There is a sense of feeling unprotected by our own council and elected members. Again, whether this is warranted or not, but it's due in part to a perceived lack of transparency and community consultation. We don't have the time today to go into the community concerns in detail, and we'd be happy to discuss them further if required. But for illustration, concerns include a perceived commitment to and endorsement of the Oscar development when the development has not even been assessed or proceeded to cap. A cursory look through the public record indicates letters and presentations from the CEO, proposed budget forecasts, inclusion in regional vision statements, etc., when this is simply a development application, not a fait accompli. Council's perceived support for the Oscar is complicated by, again, the perceived conflict of interest with public-private partnership with Seppeltsfield Wines and Bunyip Water. A further concern is the lack of transparency in Council's vision for Seppeltsfield and Marinanga, highlighted by the confidentiality of the Seppeltsfield Tourism Master Plan, which, as you would be aware, is currently the subject of an FOI request. In the same SWOT analysis which identifies the Character Preservation Act as a threat, the Seppeltsfield Wines Tourism Master Plan for a global Epicurean village is listed as an opportunity, but no transparency or visibility of this plan is available to local residents. This leads to a perception that Council is supporting a plan that has vast impact on residents, which these residents are not permitted to have any knowledge of. And lastly, added to the angst amongst residents was the unfortunate characterisation of the Oscar as a Category 2, therefore denying the broader community any voice in what is arguably the highest commercial development ever mooted in the Barossa. Again, we appreciate that the reason for this lack of public notification was premised on an amendment to the Act in April 2020, ostensibly for COVID stimulus. However, the result on a local level is the sense that the community has no voice. This resulted in residents taking their own council to the ERD court, with something in the vicinity of $130,000 needing to be raised by the local community for legal fees, simply to ask for the right to contribute to the conversation regarding Oscar. Had there been broad community consultation permitted, it would have resulted in hundreds upon hundreds of representations being lodged with the planning team. Correctly or incorrectly, these and other examples leave us as a community with the conclusion that Light Regional Council is committed to development at any price and is not committed to engaging with us as residents in the development of a collective vision for the region that we live in. It is good business sense to ensure that those people who live in an area have the chance to defend and advocate for that area. So to assist in rectifying this perception, we are asking Council to conduct a series of town hall style meetings with the Seppeltsfield and Marananga communities, where Light Regional Council clearly outlines its vision for our region and is transparent about its intentions for these hamlets. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you, our elected body. Grant and I will email this presentation to you tomorrow morning for your reference, or maybe afternoon, and look forward to your response to our twofold request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for your very powerful and passionate report. There's a lot for us to distill in all of that, and I do thank you if you can leave that report with us so that we can go through that step by step and certainly not put it to one side. We will assess that in whatever way we can. I think everyone is aware that we are governed by the Local Government Act. We're governed by so many other acts that many times ties our hands to the ground. And the classic was the court case. Our council had no option but just to go along with that because that was the law. And the law decided against what was, in my view, common sense. But nevertheless, I don't get a view. We will certainly distill all that information and do our best to see what parts of that we can get involved with without preempting anything at all, because I don't think I'm in a position to be able to do that. The elected body will decide on that when the report's put to them as to what we need to be talking about and where our priorities can be and where we can lawfully do something. So again, thank you so much for that. It was a very powerful and passionate commentary, and it's a fair bit of work put into that too, and I think, quite honestly, very, very factual as well. So thank you, Barnes, and thank you, Kathy. I'll call on now our second deputation for the Oscar Hotel development, Michelle Tujimoto. Welcome, Michelle.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Michelle Sujimoto, and this is my husband, Jeremy Pallett. We are residents of Seppeltsfield. We live opposite Seppeltsfield Winery, and Seppeltsfield proposed Oscar Hotel would be approximately 350 metres from our house. As our house is built on roughly the same land height as the hotel, we would have the unfortunate view of the top 11 stories of the hotel from our living and outdoor areas, and we're certainly horrified about that prospect. We are not alone at being horrified at the prospect of a 12-storey hotel being built at the winery, and this evening we are actually here representing the community group Taming Oscar, and we come bearing gifts. Our gift is this bundle of completed petition postcards. These are tangible evidence of a deep concern around a skyscraper being built in the crown of light, the Seppeltsfield Winery. In front of you, you have examples of the said postcards. A little history of Taming Oscar and these protest postcards. Taming Oscar began as a response to the shock and disbelief of the 12-storey, 50-metre proposal. It included directly impacted neighbours and other Barossans who saw that the detrimental impact of this kind of development would go far beyond the 14 households that were eligible to make statement of representations for the cap. Taming Oscar's mandate is to inform and engage the Barossa community and politicians to influence the redesign of the Oscar development to achieve a design outcome that is best for the Barossa and for the developers. Taming Oscar welcomes sensitive development that is congruent with the Barossa's unique character, heritage, and authentic sense of place. There is nothing that says a luxury hotel has to be a skyscraper. Some circles feel Taming Oscar is a radical group, but it is quite puzzling given that it is aimed at protecting and saying that the light development plan and the unique piece of legislation, the Character Preservation Act, is applied to developments in the region. Really, what's more radical, proposing a skyscraper for the Barossa and claiming it fits with development codes, or trying to see that the codes are complied with? There are 3 points in particular of Seppeltsfield Winery Policy Area 5 that Oscar is absurdly incongruent with. Objectives, point 2, preservation of the Seppelts Winery buildings and other buildings of significant heritage value, and ensuring that the development is complementary to them. Form and character, point 3, development should be sympathetic with the existing winery and associated buildings in terms of design, style, siting, scale, form, detailing, materials, and colour. Point 4, development should be compatible with the conservation of the historic character of the Seppelts Winery Tourist Complex. Outside of Policy Area 5, there are countless development plan principles that centre around built structures being of appropriate scale and compatibility to surrounding buildings in order to not dominate the landscape and damage the rural charm and character of the area, one of the great drawcards for the region. Back to history. As the Oscar Hotel was deemed a Cat 2 development, precluding the greater public from having a chance to object, Taming Oscar became a voice for those who were concerned that this inappropriate development would go ahead. We learnt that the appall was widespread and far beyond the Barossa. Taming Oscar encouraged people who saw this 50-metre design as not having a place in the Barossa to make their concerns known. The Council have already received 56 oppositions to the proposal directly, and the Taming Oscar Committee tonight present Mayor O'Brien, elected members and management staff with 753 petition postcards opposing the grossly out of context 12-storey hotel. From the examples in front of you, you can see that we have 2 different designs. There is a greater uptake than anticipated, so a second design was created and printed, but they asked for the same thing. This design is inappropriate and should not be supported. The Oscar needs to be tamed. In August last year, these postcards were placed for a short time in a few locations in Greenock, Freeland, Kapunda, and several shops and cellar doors in Newry, Angaston and Tanunda until they had to be removed from the public unexpectedly. Respondents were locals, visitors from around the state and interstate. It is particularly interesting to note that despite the pandemic, lockdowns and economic instability, the hype that this building would bring huge amounts of tourists, jobs and money to the region did not fool people into believing the spin. Australia-wide, people found the design to be absurdly inappropriate and detrimental for Seppeltsfield and the Barossa as a whole. Over 700 people voiced their objection by signing these petition postcards. As another sign of their displeasure, the Oscar Hotel has been freely nicknamed the Slug and Dick in a Vineyard, hardly endearing monikers. Taming Oscar was threatened with copyright infringement legal action by the developer for not seeking permission to use Oscar images on these postcards, despite the fact that images were all over the internet, print media, and even in LRC presentations to government ministers. The usual rule of thumb in publicity stakes is that any publicity is good publicity, isn't it? Apparently not in this case. Those images were creating more revulsion than support for the skyscraper. Fair enough, permission was not sought. We removed the cards from the public earlier than anticipated, and that is why there is only 753. I say only, but has LRC ever seen this much objection to a project? Has LRC ever had objections from around Australia about a project? Our guess is that if there had been international tourism at the time, objections would have had international addresses as well. Over 750 people also show their support for Taming Oscar's mandate by being members of our Facebook group. But there are certainly more people who visit our site than have become members. One Facebook post we had depicted how dominating Oscar would be in the view from the popular tourist destination, the Seppelt Family Mausoleum. Where visitors stand at the mausoleum and look over Seppeltsfield, Oscar would be roughly 17 metres taller and pretty much the whole building visible. That post had now 9.1 thousand views. This shows the passion that is felt about the Barossa. People are hugely concerned that bringing a city-born building here will not only ruin the charm, character, heritage and history of Seppeltsfield, but also set a dangerous precedent, saying that the Character Preservation Act and local development codes are worthless. What then of the economic future for this beautiful area when the Barossa just becomes a satellite Adelaide? Of course, as a council, you are going to say anyone has the right to submit whatever development plan they wish, and it is up to the council assessment panel to pass or reject it. And the elected members and staff here tonight are not that assessment body. We acknowledge that, but the feeling in the community is that this council has not been open and transparent in this matter and had already philosophically endorsed the project before it was even made public. From what we can see in records from the early days of Seppeltsfield Estate Winery, looking at a tourist village concept roughly 10 years ago, LRC encouraged the winery to engage in community consultation, seeing that Seppeltsfield Winery is a precious and valuable space, and large-scale insensitive development would not be welcome or appropriate. This action is to be commended. However, from what we can see in records, after some minor consultation with no mention of a 12-storey hotel, Seppeltsfield Estate refused to do any more consultation, and LRC has just let that ride. What a pity, because the advent of Oscar has particularly galvanised community distrust in LRC and shown that Seppeltsfield Estate has no interest in the community outside of their own curtilage. This is a great shame because some of the loudest speakers for the winery and its recent beautiful renovations have been the local community. The Seppeltsfield Master Plan has been kept confidential. Council have chosen to ignore public interest. Apparently a 50-metre hotel with a rooftop bar and guests arriving by helicopter is not of interest to the neighbours in the hamlet of Seppeltsfield. Whether it is real or not, there is a perceived conflict of interest in that council seems to be ready to turn a blind eye to the development plan and Character Preservation Act for the region in favour of support, real or otherwise, for this hotel. We acknowledge and applaud the time and effort taken by those few councillors who've responded to emails and phone calls and made the time to do site visits in order to gain an understanding of the magnitude of this development and its potential impacts. We implore the council as a whole to recognise that this region cannot be open slather to insensitive development at any cost when there is a region's hard-earned precious reputation to protect. That reputation is the economic future of the Barossa. In conclusion, please let the record show that the community group Taming Oscar has tonight presented 753 postcards to Light Regional Council. Counting the 56 objections already received directly by Council, and if our maths is correct, that makes a massive total of 809 objections to the 12-storey, 50-metre Oscar Hotel. On behalf of Taming Oscar and concerned Barossa lovers all around, thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Again, that was a very passionate and powerful presentation as well. And, you know, you've raised many, many points there that, I mean, around the table here, we're probably not aware of. I think that some of the matters you raised were a bit alarming, to be perfectly honest. And I don't think as a council we were perhaps aware of some of these matters. I think if we get a copy of that presentation, we would like to be able to once again distill what has been said and try and work out some way we can respond to that in an appropriate and responsible manner. We understand exactly where you're coming from, and we represent the residents and the citizens of this region. We're trying to do our best to do that. However, we're sometimes tied between a rock and a hard place, and I think you did allude to that when you talked about the cap, where we have no council representation on these decisions that are being made. We find that rather striking because we're the elected body and we're here, you know, taking the blame for what somebody else will or will not do. And that's very difficult at times. But be assured that we haven't taken sides in any way whatsoever. From my perspective, certainly haven't. And in fact, it's a matter that hasn't been discussed all that often at council at all. As the Oscar development, we knew that there's been a Taming Oscar group, of course, and I'm a good friend of James Lindner, so right from the very beginning, I got a serve from James, and at the time I was a passionate spray, but he's tamed down a little bit with me, and we get on quite well still. But no, I think you know, what you've raised tonight does send alarm bells through our council. I think 753 postcards with and genuine concerns, not just a petition that's left in the local deli and for anyone to sign. I think these are a little bit more substantial than that, so they're more meaningful. So we do thank you for that, and that provides us evidence to eventually take a position on this. And we need to. If this is what the people in our region want, this is what we will do. And we've got to be convinced of that, of course, because there's always two sides to any argument, and we've got to listen to the other side also. If we didn't have developers, we wouldn't. Where would we be? So we've got to rely on them a little bit too to be able to do their job and to be able to look to what they consider the future and all of that. They see it in a different way. Regrettably, many of them don't live here and probably never will, but they impose these structures and so forth, or things on us as a community. But be assured that we will take into account what you've said tonight, and we will look very carefully at what you've said and how we can approach some of those matters. Some of them, as I've mentioned, would be out of our control, but we will do our very best. And again, I thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the other guests too that took the time to attend, and the ones online also. I hope you understand that we do care, and we will do what we can do to ensure that we're listening. So thank you again. We might move on, councillors. We have a presentation now, 7.3 of your council agenda. Councillors, I've got a new system tonight to help me run through our council agenda that Richard and Kari were kindly put in front of me, and I love it. It's just going to take me a little bit of time to get used to this, and when I write all over and scribble all over it, it makes it even a little bit harder. But our next presentation is from Rob Wallace, and welcome, Rob. Rob's the General Manager of HR and Municipal Training, and is been invited to give us a little outline on the CEO performance review. Thank you, Rob, and a big welcome. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors and staff. So the CEO Performance Review Program, I believe you've received the documentations from June in terms of the timetable got a 3-month timetable kicking off today with my presentation. And what I intend to do is really open up to any questions that you may have in regards to this. And of course, Brian at the next meeting will be presenting his achievements, not only over the previous 12 months, but at the time that he's been the CEO of this council. We will then distribute the 360-degree survey through SurveyMonkey with a list of selected survey attendees. And then I will meet individually with each elected member. So what we're trying to do with the performance review, we're looking at both the objective measures, that is, how are we performing against the annual business plan? Are we meeting all of our legislative obligations? And then and have we resolved resolutions of council within a timely frame? And then we'll move on to the more subjective measures in terms of relationships between the CEO and the elected body, the CEO and the community, CEO and senior staff, or staff in general, staff relations, intergovernmental relationships. In terms of both attitude, approach, professionalism. So we'll have a final report to you by the end of January for your endorsement after we've compiled all of that information. We've kept the format similar to what this council has used previously, so it's a slightly different format to what I have used myself previously, but it's a very thorough process, so I'm quite confident in achieving the correct outcomes by using that process. So are there any questions of me, I suppose, in relation to how we're going to manage this process moving forward?
Questions, councillors? I think we're very confident and very confident and happy with this process. We've been guided by June in the early days, and your appointment has been very welcomed. And we look forward to going through the process and nailing down our CEO where we can.
Well, all feedback's good, and certainly I think we would all as staff welcome feedback from not only our direct managers, but also from our subordinates. So we look forward to the process.
Certainly.
All right.
Councillor Simon?
If I may, it talks in there about stakeholder engagement. So who are these stakeholders that you're going to engage?
So I've been provided with a list of a 360-degree list of who we're going to contact. So what we'll do is we'll distribute that to the elected members at the next meeting. And if you decide that there's other people that should be added on, then as a group, it's really your process. I'm facilitating the process, but it's the process of the elected body. You're the employer. So if you feel like there's somebody missing off the list or somebody shouldn't be on the list, sorry, Julia.
Through the chair, Simon, I just provided Rob with the previous list of participants, and that is the elected members, general managers, and Terry as exec assistant as the 360 review process. But if you need to give feedback to Rob on that list, we're just following on from the last meeting. The information I've provided to Rob is the same as has been undertaken in the last 2 performance reviews to continue along those lines to complete this cycle.
So some CEO reviews, we've looked at other CEOs in the region, or we've looked at state government representatives that might have some interaction with the CEO, and we've asked for their opinion. So they're decisions that you need to make as a council.
Yeah, that's what really I was getting at. Is wouldn't it be prudent to include business owners and people like developers and people that contribute to the success of this council, and that the CEO does have interactions with in those stakeholders, and not just the council people?
I think certainly you need to be able to measure the effectiveness of the CEO with a range of people. So if you feel that it should be expanded, then I wouldn't disagree with that.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Councillor Simon. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Key performance indicators, we just, the standard ones, or is there anything, should we be putting any input into that?
So key performance indicators, there are really two components. So again, we have our subjective measures, which is my opinion, your opinion in relation to the behaviour, the conduct, the mannerisms, and then we have our objective measures with the key performance indicators. And so there are really a couple of areas that I like to draw KPIs from. One is the position description for the CEO, things like legislative compliance. The other one would be your annual business plan. What is it that we're expecting to be achieved over the next 12 months? And what is the measure of success? So as long as we set that up, then we'll be in a very strong position to do that review in 12 months' time. And the key performance indicators from the last one, we'll be able to measure that performance over the... I'm not sure that you did one last year. I think it's been 2 years. Is that right?
Through the chair, we missed last year's, and
Right.
that was brought up at the last meeting. So the KPIs can be drawn from the last 2 financial years with annual business plan reviews and achievements.
So we look at 2 years' worth.
Further questions, councillors? If not, I'll ask that we bring the leave of the meeting to bring 13.1 forward for the discussion in regards to recommendations in the report. So it's 13.1. I'm not sure what page that is on. Page 31, councillors. Do I have leave of the meeting, by the way? Do that? Thanks, councillors. Are there any questions? If not, there are 2 recommendations there. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, someone like to second that? Councillor Jason? No further comment or questions? If not, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? Those carried. Thank you, councillors. So we move on now to 7.4. It's a presentation of the final infrastructure asset management plan. I might pass over to Richard to introduce Steve Walker from Asset Engineering. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Mayor Bill. Yeah, look, welcome here, Steve from Asset Engineering. Steve's been working with us now for probably the best part of 12 plus months.
Longer.
Yeah, undertaking the review of our infrastructure and asset management plan, and elected members may recall Steve coming into this chamber and presenting a draft previously, and that draft or the draft that he provided has now been put into a final draft, and he's picked up all the feedback that we've provided from the previous presentation that he made, and a range of inputs from staff, probably being mainly Govind and Jason Norman, who obviously didn't want to come into this room. Yeah, so yeah, over to you, Steve, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, thanks for letting me present to you tonight. This has been quite a project that's been ongoing, as Richard said, for about 12 months now. It's certainly been an eye-opener to me in terms of getting to know council and how they do business, and every council is very much different. So it's only a very brief presentation that I'm going to run through tonight. There's quite a bit of work that's involved in putting these plans together, and not just work by myself, work by staff as well. As you recall, I presented to you, I think around about sort of 4 months ago now, and where we discussed service levels. So that's a key part of the asset management plan. I won't discuss that tonight, although essentially the work that I'm presenting to you is very much a culmination of looking at those service levels. But just as a bit of a recap of what is an asset management plan. So it's a combination of management of physical, financial, economic, engineering and other practices applied to physical assets with the objective of providing the required level of service in the most cost-effective manner. One of the key issues with developing an asset management plan is to balance levels of service that you're providing to the community through infrastructure by risk and funding. So you've got funding and risk on one side, and you've got the level of service provided to the community on the other side. Normally, if there's more funding, that means a higher level of service, and if and a consummate lower level of risk, and the opposite is true, of course. So it's very much the philosophy that we've gone through in developing this asset management planning framework. So the contents of the asset management plan, what's been used is the International Infrastructure Management Manual, and as the template for that. So this is used throughout the world as a template for developing asset management plans, particularly in local government. That gives you a table of contents of the technical asset management plans themselves. So it largely looks at these three key areas. So levels of service, future demand and risk management were developed with staff. So that was facilitated in terms of 11 workshops that we undertook with staff and documented what their perceived service levels were for infrastructure. And associated with that, you can see that just grey underneath there is the life cycle management plan. So we attach cost to those service levels. Now, the plan I'm going to talk about tonight is essentially just a summary. So I'm going to talk about a summary of a summary tonight, very briefly. But the summary, which is the title that you see there at the top of the picture, has a number of documents sitting underneath it, which I refer to as the technical asset management plan. So they're more formal in nature and more technical in their documentation. So they look at detail within those infrastructure asset groups, which the first one is bridges, floodways, footpaths, stormwater and transport assets. So that looks at detailed service levels for that particular asset group, and looks at life cycle costing particular to the asset group, future demand factors and risk factors, just to name a few. So those three asset management plans are fairly sort of bland, sort of technical documents, but they lead up into this summary document, which I guess we hope that the community will endeavour to have a look at and give you feedback on. So it's a much more easily read document. So that's the cover page for it. This is the second page in the document. What is an asset management plan? I've been through this largely as I've spoken, but what we're looking at is looking at the service levels and the costs associated with the key areas of the life cycle of an asset. So that's acquisition, operations, maintenance, renewal, and disposal, which are the key areas of the asset management plan. So what assets does the council have? It's got a very, very diverse asset portfolio. Being a regional council, so you have CWMS assets, you have streetlight assets, you have obviously roads, stormwater assets, footpaths, buildings. So it's a very diverse asset portfolio, and those are the services that you provide. Also unsealed roads as well as sealed roads, playgrounds, all those sort of things. So this is essentially a very high level summary of the document overall. So in terms of the life cycle costs, we've looked at over 10 years, you need around about $97.75 million in terms of the total life cycle costs. That includes operations, maintenance, renewal and acquisition, and your budget through your long-term financial plan is around about $86 million currently. There's around about a $1.4 $5 million annual shortfall as it currently stands. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail moving on. So what we measure within the asset management plans, in the detailed asset management plans, we look at service levels. So this is what the community can expect to receive from assets that council provides. So assets aren't there just because it's nice to have an asset, it's there to provide a service to the community. So what are some of the values that are seen by the community in terms of assets? They're listed there. Smooth roads, clean streets, safe footpaths, for instance. They're just some examples. So this is in ratepayer speak. So what they would like to see from assets, okay, not technical discussion. In terms of the customer measures, how we're going to measure that, looking at quality or condition, function and capacity. Okay, so condition assessment is normally looked at through quality, function, that varies by the asset type, obviously, and then the capacity, so that varies by the asset type as well. So because currently it's underfunded, you can expect a general decline in the quality and the function over the period of the 10 years of the asset management plan. And this gives you, on the right-hand side, you see some breakdown in terms of the funding. Now, associated with this, some technical service levels that I won't go into tonight, but they're detailed in the technical asset management plans themselves. So you can see in terms of acquisition, you've got around about 56% of the funding that you need for acquisition. Now, if you recall last time we spoke about service level upgrades for township roads, for instance, for steering township roads, for putting curbing on township roads or word curbs, putting footpaths on township roads, that sort of thing. So within your current long-term financial plan provisions, you have around about 56% of the funds for that. Operation and maintenance costs, because you're acquiring new assets that are donated to you, or you propose to upgrade existing assets, your operations and maintenance costs don't stay stagnant. The modelling has included an increase in those operations and maintenance costs. So you have 97% of the maintenance funds and 91% of the operations funds, roughly. Renewal, so that's like to like. Okay, so you've got a road that's a spray seal, that's replacing that road that's a spray seal with a spray seal. You've got a park with a swing, that's replacing it with a swing. Okay, so that's not upgrading it to a new play station or anything like that. So renewal, you've got around about 90% of the funds that you need, and disposal, that hasn't been considered through the planning. So this shows in a little bit more detail in terms of the life cycle management. So again, we've broken that down by the different areas: the disposal, renewal, acquisition, maintenance and operations. You can see the graphs there. Now remember, this is the graphs that contain all your assets. Okay, the individual asset management plans themselves detail this at the specific asset type in some detail. This is just a summary. So this is the life cycle that we can expect from an asset. So acquisition, the asset's put in place; operation, maintenance, they happen straight away. Then eventually we renew an asset and then dispose of that asset and then acquire another asset. So that's the general thing that we consider. So you can see in the graph in the centre that there, that's colour coded by the different life cycle types. Risk management is a very important part of asset management. So that's been considered again in some detail in the technical documents. This is just a summary of that. So that's been done in association with the Australian Standard for Risk Management. What essentially that's found is further work needs to be done. As everything with asset management, it's a journey, not a destination. So there's always improvements to be made. So some of the things that need to be done moving forward in relation to reducing your risk are undertaking a bridge condition assessment, develop a 5-year costed rolling works program for township roads. So that's a detailed condition assessment and developing a works program from that. Investigation of the condition of the pool and associated plant. review playground provision and condition, inspect CWMS earthenware pipes that are getting quite old. That's actually done through the depot at the moment, so they've got a camera, so that needs to be sort of brought back in Longan and more work done in that regard. Taken appropriate action to mitigate overflows from CWMS plant as well. Okay, so this slide brings all the, and I'll spread this out over a few slides here, but I've discussed this throughout the previous slides in a little bit of detail. But capital renewals, we've got, so this is like for like, you've got around about $510,000 annual shortfall. A number of those capital renewals are tied to acquisition. So if we as we discussed previously with Township Roads, that's just one example. So if we consider renewal and acquisition together, you've got around about a $1 million shortfall for renewal and acquisition per annum. In terms of all the estimated costs, you've got around about $1.2 million annual shortfall. So that includes increase in operations and maintenance costs through acquisition of new assets on top of that. Predominant reasons for the shortfall, I'll discuss that. I've got a slide in more detail in regards to that in a few moments. But this is just a simple table showing compares the different parts of the life cycle costing. So you can see their forecast operation, forecast acquisition, forecast maintenance. Those are all the work that's been done in determining how much you need to spend in the future on acquisition of new assets and renewal of existing assets. The total budget there, that's your current long-term financial plan as it stands. So then we look at an annual shortfall. Okay, we're comparing the total forecast to the total budget, and then the cumulative shortfall. So that's adding up those annual shortfalls. And you can see over the period of the plan, we've got around about $11.9 million shortfall. Reasons for that shortfall, as I previously suggested, it's due to growth in operations and maintenance costs associated with new acquisitions. Your long-term financial plan doesn't include a significant provision for increase in maintenance and operations moving forward. So because this is quite a high growth council, you will need to consider that within future revisions of your long-term financial plan. So that's additional staff, additional plant, additional equipment, those sort of things to just undertake operations and maintenance works. Otherwise, the infrastructure will fall behind. You'll get customer requests to build up of those. You won't be able to respond to those requests as quickly as you do now. Within the current long-term financial plan, there hasn't been any funding directed to level of service increases. So that's acquisition and upgrade associated with Township Road upgrades at the next reseal date. That's not to say it's not necessarily going to happen. That's just there isn't a provision within your long-term financial plan for that. And a recent adjustment to the long-term financial plan didn't include an allowance for the stormwater and footpath upgrades as well. So those last two are the significant reasons for the shortfall. So some of the improvements, there's I think each of the technical asset management plans has around about 1.5 pages of improvements in them that are very detailed, and these need to be resourced by the organisation because quite often the organisation can be tested on these through an audit moving forward, see if it's committed to undertaking these improvements before the preparation of the next asset management plan. So as I previously spoke, re-audit the road network with a review to developing a detailed rolling works program, undertake a bridge inspection, review of the unit rates and valuation methodology. That's a key one as well because we've used different assumptions in terms of developing these this renewal program. Your valuations need to link to that program so they're not disparate in your valuations aren't telling you one thing and your renewal program or your asset management plans aren't telling you a separate thing. So those two need to be linked. So a review needs to be undertaken of your unit rates and the valuation methodology, including useful lives. Undertaking a utilisation review of the council buildings. That's been brought up in a number of the workshops. A number of the council buildings are quite old and aren't utilised as much as they could be or should be. Undertaking review of the playgrounds and open space throughout the council with a view to prioritise renewal planning. So it's not necessarily the same because of parks, but a PlayStation and at the moment that should necessarily be renewed as that existing sort of PlayStation, but perhaps some work needs to be done in terms of optimising that expenditure across the council as a whole. CWMS undertake a study to model growth against existing schemes. Again, because this is very much a growth council, your existing CWMS schemes have largely been based on servicing the existing community, not the proposed community. Upgrade of lagoons, Kapunda and Greenock to be investigated and costed, and also very importantly update this plan. So that's been an extremely sort of short summary of best part of my work for the past year. So, and a lot of involvement with council staff during that process as well. So is there any questions?
Councillors, Councillor.
I just wondered, given that a lot of the figures are forecast,
Yep.
When I look at, and I spoke to Richard about this yesterday, indented car parking on Hanson Street, there's a lot of figures in there that may not happen. That's because it's a forecast. So when you work out the shortfall, you take that into account?
Okay, so a couple of things here. One of which I talk about. With
I read the whole document.
Improvement. So what's proposed to happen is a re-audit of the road network. We'll look at optimising an inspection on a road-by-road basis in terms of what needs to be spent on a road-by-road basis that spans over the next 5 years. So that's a detailed project level costing. So it's an important point to make. I'm glad you've raised it because most of the work that's been developed in terms of this asset management plan is based on a desktop review. Okay, so it's existing information that the council has at hand, right? So, and the data is several years old associated with that as well. So one of the key next steps with sort of optimising this is to undertake a project level review of infrastructure that will fall due over the next 5 years with a view to working out, say for instance, if a pavement reconstruction is required, what sort of reseal is required, whether those parking bays are needed or not, what they should be resealed with, all those sort of things. Okay, so and that's obvious with the transport, footpaths, playgrounds, particularly buildings as well. So we've used the best available data that we've got at hand in terms of developing this plan, but there's still a lot of work moving forward. So
I have a further question, if I may. So when this goes to public consultation, how is the fact that it's a forecast underlined so that people, if they have a look at it, that they know that it's a forecast, that it's not in black and white? It just concerns me that when we're putting a document out to the public like that, and many of them would not understand.
The technical documents themselves talk about how they've been compiled and the limitations in terms of their compilation. What some councils do, because they haven't got best data that they could have, and many councils are in that boat, is they remove the annexure from the document that goes to public consultation. So the annexure that you're referring to in terms of the schedule of works, they, or I think in recalling now the document that I put together, it had a caveat on the annexure that it was only an estimated program of work. So It depends on the council. Some councils include that with a caveat on the front of the annexure. Other councils remove it. So that's up to council.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The accounting, the budgeting, is that includes our general grant funding, or does that shortfall mean that our wonderful staff have to go on and get extra grants to cover that shortfall?
The grant funding is allowed for in terms of the costing generally, yes. So it includes the grant funding. So the council is still short around about 11 point, how many million dollars it was over the 10 years, can measure it with the grant funding, yes.
And that grant funding is sort of averaged over the past period of time. What period of time has that been? Because we had a COVID funding splurge, so has that been taken into account then?
Where it impacts the program is particularly in relation to sealing unsealed roads and that sort of thing. So the way it's been considered within the program, an allowance has been made for that sort of work. So that's been an allowance based on sort of what's happened historically, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, it's unknown how much grant funding is received or isn't received, but there's an understanding that the council will only seal an unsealed road if they get grant funding associated with that. So where it's probably less accurate is in terms of the operations and maintenance funds associated with that. So if you get more grants, it will understate the operations and maintenance cost moving forward. If you get less grants, it will overstate that. So it's assumptions, but in the main, the renewal projections are as good as they can be at the moment, and the acquisitions are as good as they can be, which is the main part of the document.
Further questions, councillors? If not, I'd like to thank you so much, Steve. It's a robust and certainly very detailed body of work you've put to our council, and we certainly appreciate that. I might ask Leaver of the meeting once again to bring forward 13.2, which is the draft infrastructure and asset management plan, which you would find on page 34 of your agenda. I'll have Leaver of the meeting to bring that matter forward. Thank you, councillors. And there's a series of recommendations attached to that. I'll still open up for questions, though, if there are any. Councillor Dean?
Mayor Bill, I think Richard was going to do a bit of expansion on an answer. Was that right, Richard? And you wanted to do that?
Oh, look, thanks for that. Yeah, look, through the chair, it was really just to point out on that the funding is straight from our long-term financial plan data that we've already got. So we haven't added extra in to that. We've simply gone long-term financial plan, and this is what it would be modelled on. So there is currently a gap, as you can see, and the process from here is to allow the consultation to occur, even though we're showing an underfunding. It would go to the audit committee, as the recommendation pointed out. In November, our aim is to bring a finance report to the elected body showing that, or what we're hoping to be able to show is that we can fund the, or not just fund the gap. In fact, I don't think we'll be able to fund the full gap, but we'll be able to bridge that gap a little bit. And then our aim would be to adopt the IAM as it in an abridged form. So probably one of the key things is that Steve has presented, and that would be a fully funded IAM. And that's probably what we've been presented tonight. So over the years, you've probably seen our trending data, which can be much lower than 100%, and there is some anomalies where it's actually gone up above 100%. So the reality is to fully fund it at the $1.2 million gets us to 100%. The question will be for us is, are we happy to fund it to 95% and make us work a bit harder for that extra 5%, or what way it goes? So we while we go to public consultation to say, this is the ideal IAMP. The reality may well be that we actually can't afford to go to that level of service. And as I say, in November, we'll bring a report back, 2 reports back that will show how we're going to fund it, and hopefully then we adopt the asset management plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions, councillors? If not, I'd suggest that, this is a very, very important document and sort of guides our future in many respects. We do have some recommendations there. Someone would like to move that way? Councillor Sam? I'd like to second that. Councillor Jason? Further questions? If not, comments? If not, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. And again, thank you so much, Steve, for your extraordinary efforts. We're much appreciated. Councillors, we can move back now to our normal council agenda. We have no adjourned business, but we have quite a bit of business arising. So we'll move to business arising, which should be on page 4 of your council agenda. Yes, just before we go into business arising, we were Onira up from our last meeting was pointed out to us earlier, and Richard might just go through that to what that was. There was something left out.
Yeah, thank you, and our apologies. But at the 28th of September meeting, Councillor Kennelly had 2 motions on notice, one of which was relating to the Freeling CFS, and the other one relating to the maintenance of Class 3 and 4 roads. Unfortunately, both of those matters were omitted from the business arising. So I'll just give a verbal update. We are waiting on information from the CFS in relation to that motion, and the Class 3 and 4 roads will be included in the Infrastructure Committee agenda next week. So I do apologise for that.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Councillor Kennelly, for highlighting that. Councillors, September 24, 2019, 27th of January, 21, 23rd of March, 21, 27th of July, 21, 31st of August, 21, 28th of September, 21. Ooh. Wow. I think they're all completed, councillors. So apart from the agenda item, which is 13.1, CA's performance review, which we've undertaken. So we move on now, councillors, to the minutes of our committee meetings, the first one being 10.1, the Infrastructure Committee. I have a recommendation that the motion on notice submitted to the meeting of the Light Regional Council Infrastructure Committee held Wednesday, 1st September, number 1, as listed below, be adopted. Yes. Councillor Lynn, would someone like to second that? It was inadvertently left out. Councillor Peter, thanks, Councillor Peter. Any comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, those against, that's carried. All right, that's the Infrastructure Committee. Okay, we move on to 10.2, the Strategy Committee. But the agenda reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Strategy Committee held Wednesday, the 13th of October, be received. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor David, someone like to second that? Councillor Sam, all those in favour, those against, that's carried. The recommendation 2 that the reports, oh no, pardon me, are there any items for withdrawal or discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the second recommendation that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Strategy Committee held Wednesday the 13th of October 2021, numbered 1 to 3, as listed below, be adopted. Someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor David. Someone like to second that? Okay. Councillor Sharon, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. We have no report from the Economic Development Panel nor from the Audit and Risk Committee. But we go on to 10.5, which is the Governance Advisory Panel. I have a recommendation that the reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Governance Advisory Panel held Tuesday, 12th of October be received. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Jason and Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillors, are there any matters that you would like to have withdrawn or would you like to discuss? No. Recommendation 3. Okay, we've got to put recommendation 2, councillors, that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Governance Advisory Panel held Tuesday the 12th of October, numbered 1 to 5, listed below, be adopted. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Sam. Someone like to second that? Councillor Jason, all those in favour? Those against? Councillor Bill? Motion's carried. We have a recommendation at the top of page, what am I doing? At the top of page 12, that the item GAP 12.1.2021 confidential matter, elected member training associated matters of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Governance Advisory Panel held Tuesday, 12th of October, be considered by Council under confidential section of this agenda. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean and Councillor Bill. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on now to our reports for information, section 11 of our council agenda. The first one being the monthly financial report. Are there any questions in relation to the Councillor Bill?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just going through the monthly financial report. Just one thing I would want to question is the elected members' expenses. In that we've spent $109,000 and we're budgeted on $69,000, being $40,000. So, Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure it wasn't you spending that money, and just whether there's an explanation to that, please.
All the blood's drained over the face.
Through the chair, I'm happy to explain, Councillor Close. What happened was the usual accounts payable person went on leave, and we have a new person who's commenced. We paid the second quarter in advance by probably a few weeks, which has impacted the statement. That will even out again with future reports, as the next payment will be paid when it's normally due. So it was just paid a couple of weeks early, and so came into the monthly figures earlier than usual. So it's not going to be increased by the end of the year. It'll even out.
So we've been paid. It's gone right through to us, or is it?
It's gone. Yes, it has gone through a couple of weeks
already.
early.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. That's the explanation.
Further questions, councillors, in relation to that? Thank you, June. Next matter, the temporary closure for Ealing RSL Remembrance Day service. And also, Councillor Peter.
Mr. Mayor, in expenses, I noticed the last item is Gawler Water Reuse Scheme. The expenditure there, 20,000. The September budget was 140,000. A lot of variance there. Two questions: why the variance, and what is the expense? What are we spending money for there?
Question. Need help?
Through the chair, that's the Virginia Pipeline Scheme fees, and we've just paid a very large invoice for that, so I think we'll see that hit the book. Yeah, either in the next figures or
Yeah, through the chair, I think there was a timing issue with an invoice that came for Virginia Pipeline Water from SA Water, and it actually came to us quite late, so not sure that it actually related to this period that we're in. So it was just the way it came to us.
So the figures quoted there relate to purchase of water from the Virginia Pipeline Scheme.
Yep.
See.
Further questions, councillors? If not, we'll move on to 11.2, temporary closure for Freeling RSL Remembrance Day. Questions? 11.3, temporary closure Freeling Christmas Street Party. Great to see that happening. 11.4, Kapunda RSL Remembrance Day. And a recommendation on top of page 18 that reports for information be received and the contents herein noted by council. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Bill and Councillor Simon. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, we move on now to consensus reports for decision. The first recommendation at the top of the page is that the agenda and reports presented under item 12, consensus reports for decision of this ordinary meeting of the Light Regional Council, held Tuesday, 26th of October, be received. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Bill and Councillor Simon, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillors, are there any matters that you would like to have withdrawn? Pretty straightforward. The recommendation 2, therefore, is that the reports of the meeting of the Light Regional Council held Tuesday the 26th of October 2021 and the associated recommendations as set out below under item 12, consensus reports of decision, be adopted. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Simon and Councillor Jason. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on to 13.1, which we have dealt with. 13.2 we have dealt with. 13.3, councillors, 2022 elected member workshop. I would really encourage councillors to get behind this, but I'll open it up for discussion. There's a recommendation there also. Do you have any comments or questions? Councillor Simon?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea and I fully support it.
Thank you, Simon. I think it's very timely, councillors. We're going into an election year. It'd be very good to sort of really understand where we're up to at the moment and what we see as our vision for that future. So I have a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Simon and Councillor Dean, all those in favour? Those against? Motion. Certainly.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I fully support this, but they can be a waste of time if we're not done some homework beforehand. If we really need to have some ideas before we go into the workshop, because otherwise we discuss the idea and we're still fresh. So if we're really going to make this work, I think we really need some really good stuff before we do it. That was my comment.
I think that's very valid, Councillor Bill, and perhaps we could call for a little bit of an overview of where we're at, an overview of the future and an overview of the current budget. Just a very generalised template that will give us some roadmap to provide some questions that we might like to ask, and so, etc. Does that sound reasonable, Councillor Bill? Yeah, Richard, like
just through the chair. Look, if there are any, significant strategic type matters that people would like to discuss or put on, please speak with staff or Mayor, Deputy Mayor, because we're certainly keen to hear the ideas. But in terms of the day, we would anticipate that it will be a very strategic and a very well thought out agenda, where staff will be given time to present, elected members and staff will have time to discuss. but it will be a full day, we see, and broadly broken up into those topics where each of them is given time, to discuss. And this will all be in advance of our budget preparation cycle and our, future things that we're looking to do. But if there are, key things that you would like to see put on there, please let us know.
You might note too, councillors, that the legislation has been changed and we're able to run our workshops now. In the past, they were called gatherings and all sorts of issues surrounded that. And we got around that by calling special meetings of council, which required an agenda, required all the formality and so forth. It's so refreshing to see us be able to get back to common sense and be able to sit around the table and talk about these things. If the public want to be there, they're welcome. And they always have been. So there wasn't a real big shift. And they changed that legislation, except made it very awkward for councils to be able to comply and to be able to do things in a casual, in an open manner, and outside of the formalities of a full council meeting. So this is a real opportunity for us to get back to those days where we can have a good, robust discussion around the table without getting into too much formality. So thanks, councillors. Did I have a report set in and moved? Oh, well dealt with. Thank you for your question, Councillor Bill. Oh. Okay, we move now to the 5 Shilling Estate and the activation proposal finalisation. And I think there'll be a large sigh of relief going around the chamber seeing this report. Are there any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor David.
I've noticed now that Aqua Reef have walked away from this agreement that we have with them. What did it cost us for legal costs to set this up to this stage? We any feel for that?
We'd have to take that on notice, Mr. Mayor, but we will respond to that question.
Thank you.
Further questions, councillors? If not, we have a recommendation up there, or we have 3 as a matter of fact, about a third of the way down the page. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Jason, Councillor Dean. Further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to the staff too that have been able to manage this to get us to this level. It's been a long journey. Everyone would agree with that. The next point, 13.5, is the Light Regional Council annual report, and I must commend Pepper and her team, and June and Carrie and all these people that have been involved in this, the annual report. It's not a simple matter to put together, but I think it's an excellent document, and it does paint the picture of what this council has been about for the last 12 months very clearly, and I think it will be very well received by our resident ratepayers. So, we thank you for that. Are there any questions, councillors, in relation to the annual report, which I know we'll have a hard copy at the next council meeting, should this be adopted tonight. But don't be afraid to comment on this or suggest any changes you may feel necessary. Any comments or questions, councillors?
Through the chair, maybe. I really would like to thank Carrie, Pepper and Ken Lyons in the library for producing this report, and financials will come next month. Thank you.
No, it's an excellent report, and it's very in depth, and I don't think anything's left out. Thanks, councillor. Then anyone like to second that? Councillor Simon, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Move on to 13.6, Rosebery Township expansion deeds, template assignment deed with land transfers. I think this is a really valuable tool for our planning department that will open it up for discussion. There's a recommendation here also. Any comments, councillors, or discussion in relation to this matter? Any questions to Craig? If not, I think it's a real positive step in the right direction, and there is a recommendation there if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Dean, would someone like to second that? Councillor David. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. Now we've got draft library strategic plan. I think we've all had a chance to have a good look at that, and I'd like to acknowledge the good work that the library have undertaken in the last 12 months and beyond that, expanding the range of services that are available. It's not just a place where you borrow a book anymore. And, you know, I think it's we've got a real future there, and our residents are taking this on and embracing the new way and joining in the programs that are being presented. So we thank you for that. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Jason.
Not a question, just a comment. I actually have been there on a couple of occasions on weekends to do little courses with my kids at the library, and it's working really well. It's really good. So I just thought I'd like to share that.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Councillor Jason. It's good. Any further questions or comments, Councillor Bill?
Thanks, Mr. Yeah, just a comment to say that pleased to see the growing use of Hewitt as a library area. We in the southern, we're a bit illiterate, so it's good to be able to get into a book to read. Or actually, I'm into reading talking books because that's a lot easier. But we really appreciate it.
Yeah, speaking of Hewitt, I'd like to see us have a future council meeting at Hewitt once again. It's been some time, and I think we owe it to the community down there to have a council meeting there, and I don't think it's that difficult. We are a little bit more tech committed at this stage to that, but I think we could probably achieve something for the Hewitt community, and I think they'd like to see our presence down there at least once a year. So it's something we can keep in mind.
It's just down the road, Bill.
It's just near Gawler Belt, isn't it? Or is it part of Gawler? No. Did I get a mover and a seconder for these recommendations? No. I'll put the recommendation. Councillor Jason, move. Someone like to second that motion? Councillor Dean, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. And thank you, Pepper, and your team. The Road Closure Traffic Act. Councillors, you may be aware we discussed this at the last council meeting, these particular roads. I think this is formalising the decision that was taken at the last council meeting. Are there any questions in relation to this recommendation? If not, would someone like to move that way? Councillor Jason, someone like to second that? Councillor Bill, any questions or comments? No? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks to Richard and Renee. Now we have an interesting one here too, 13.9, a request for a waiver of a development application fee. I thank Craig for a very robust and forensic report in relation to this matter. It's not something that was just lightly considered. Councillor Simon.
I'd like to declare a perceived conflict of interest with this point and leave the room.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Are there any questions in relation to this, councillors, or comments that you'd like to raise? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Oh, a mover and a seconder, that's right. Would someone like to move that way? One mistake a night's not too bad. I think we need to move it. Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Bill. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. We might be able to bring Simon back in now. Getting there. Councillors, we move on to our procedural matters. Do we have any questions on notice? We do, but the response has been provided. Oh, sorry. Just a double check. Yeah. Simon, Councillor Simon, we're on to Section 14, procedural matters, and the first one is questions without notice. And we did have a question on notice from Councillor Simon, previous meeting, and the response has been provided. Are there any questions without Councillor Simon?
Yeah, through the mayor. First of all, there's two things that I'd like to say. First of all, the number 3 hasn't been, or the third point of my question hasn't really been answered, and I was wondering if that's something that could be answered.
I think the report itself answers your questions because it doesn't become a question in the end, because the report finalises the matter. I'll pass over to people who know more about this than me. Carrie, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Simon, we don't erase them, we just replace. So it's YouTube. So we just go on and replace it each month is it's my technical aspect of it, as much as I know. So.
Yeah, and is that something that takes any technical knowledge or skill or time or anything, or is it something that happens quite easily, or how does that work?
My understanding is it's a simple process that we go in and replace the, it is our IT that do it, but it goes in and gets replaced. So
if it wouldn't get replaced, so if you would leave it up there, there would be no interference would be necessary. So now, so my point being really, and that's why I'm asking these questions, is that if we wouldn't do anything, it would stay there permanently, but since we're interfering, it gets erased or over the play. Yeah. So actually, it's our effort. So we're putting effort into not having it there anymore. Well, if we wouldn't do anything, then it would be there for permanent.
It could stay. There'd need to be another resolution of council because the previous resolution.
That, yeah. All right. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, we move on. Questions without notice. We don't. Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my question without notice is that there's it's been brought to my attention that there've been graders sitting around not being used, and that it's due to the fact that there's been sickness within our grader driver group. It seems a real shame to me that we don't have other staff we can put on a grader, to have a grader sitting around at this time of the year when it's the prime time to be grading our roads. I'm sure we'll bring the wrath of our ratepayers down, if it hasn't already, to other elected members. So just my concern about the lack of grader drivers and what we can do to fix that.
That's a very fair question. Thanks, Councillor Bill. Richard, would you like to respond to that in some way?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. I was hoping that Jason was still out in the back room, but I think now I know why he was out there. Jason has been going through a process of ensuring that we do have, or we are training grader drivers, and we have I think about 2 or 3 guys that we are training up. The issue that we had I think at that particular time was it just caught us out with I think some school holidays and then a sickness, and we've also got them on our construction team as well. So trying to spread all of those people, I think probably just caught us out a little bit, but we're back on top of it now.
Thank you, Richard. Any further questions without notice, councillors? Councillor David?
I'm just wondering, when are we likely to see the business plan presented for Drover's return, or whatever you call it, here in Kapunda? Because we seem to be ongoing spending and more spending mooted now to buy property, but we haven't actually had a business plan presented to council. And when is that likely to happen?
The business, I'll go to Drover's 4. the report on the 27th of July by Kyron Chappell, that sort of outlined the background to the business model. And in that it talks about where there's been some 38 investors or operators have been targeted for the engagement. It talks about low, medium, high case scenarios. Council investment yield will be in the order of 12.5%. Income over net investment as land rental and ground lease is projected to drive an annual revenue of around 185,600. It also talks about the forecast investment yields for private sector operators and asset owners around 12.5% to 9.6% respectively. It goes on to discuss the three primary revenue elements, which is Drover's Encounter Experience, the Steakhouse Restaurant and the Stockman Experience. It also goes on to talk about the 129 jobs, and that'll come from construction, 233 jobs from operational phase. And so in the report that was provided by Kyron back in 27th of July 21, it pointed out that there was only 2 properties remaining, and one of them is to be discussed tonight. Once that land assemblage has been completed, the intention then is to go out with a communication strategy to the marketplace prior to Christmas, and then in the new year, hopefully, we'll be getting partners attached to it. So it's all the work has been done. The material is there, but the timing of issuing this is also fairly important. So it is there. It has been reported. It was reported in a confidential council meeting on July the 27th. I've outlined elements of it this evening, which will eventually be promoted to the broader community. So there's a lot of work that's been done.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Jason.
Just going on to safety, obviously discussed, speed limit change out here. Have we got any further with regards to the pedestrian crossing on the main street? We also had discussions about this a while ago, and sensors were put on the 4 corners of that pedestrian crossing. Having a business there, I'm still seeing almost on a daily basis near misses. And is it going to be a fatality before we do something about that crossing? And also touching on that same positioning on South Terrace opposite the OTR. We've had street corner meeting there, and obviously discussion was the bypass will solve that issue. I'm still seeing almost on a daily basis close calls with kids crossing there and so on and so forth. Again, is it going to be a fatality before we do something about that?
Yeah, Councillor Jason, I've got to say I was very disappointed with that meeting on South Terrace. When the police who attended that meeting with us made the statement, but they didn't say that they didn't think the area was unsafe. Well, I think they're the only ones that think it's not unsafe. It's a real problem, and of course it's exacerbated by the fact that there are 2 state highways. There's 2 state roads, so our council don't have total control over what takes place. It doesn't take away the responsibility we have to follow these things up, but that was really disappointing at street corner meeting at that time. I thought that was a bit odd. I'm pleased to say there's not many accidents on that corner, or are. Maybe they just didn't attend. But the pedestrian crossing too, I've had long chats to Richard about that, and we're really putting pressure on the department to do something about the white lines, which are almost faded. You can hardly see them. I can understand you're getting some reports from the business opposite. I'm getting reports from 2 businesses also that have this similar issues that on a daily basis that they're seeing near misses and so, etc. I think it goes further than just an education campaign to drivers. I think there's some drivers who deliberately don't stop there because they don't think pedestrian crossings are important. I don't think they should have a driver's license if that's the way they think, but this is what's occurring. It's traffic that's just not stopping because they don't want to. I don't know how you get over that. You can paint the lines brighter, you can do all sorts of things, but if they're not going to stop, we've got a problem. And I think the police need to enforce the rules and have a presence there, even if it's just an hour or so a week. Be at that crossing and book somebody. Because the moment they book someone and that gets around, that'll slow people up. But I'm still of the view that there are people going through there because they just don't care. That's sad. Councillor Jason?
I think from what I've seen, the biggest issue is visibility. And I've said it from the get-go, it needs to have lights on there. Whether that's something that we can push, or again, are we going to wait until there's a fatality before we do something? I think it'd be safer, and I've said this before, to take the damn crossing out. I've seen people cross safer further up than that position. I think it's sooner or later someone's going to die there, and I don't want to see that. Certainly not whilst, as a council member, we can do something about it.
Well, when we know there's a problem, we need to deal with it. You're quite correct. Richard?
Yeah, through the chair, we are going to deal with that matter, and we will deal with heavy vehicles in the main street. Removing heavy vehicles from the main street will give us greater flexibility in what type of crossing we can provide. Removing heavy vehicles will give us greater flexibility in what treatment we can use at South Terrace and Main Street. And removing the heavy vehicles will give us greater flexibility on the speed limit that we can implement in the main street as well. So in saying all of that, the development of the East Terrace bypass is crucial for it. And ultimately what it will be is bringing a report back here, getting the elected members to support the removal of heavy freight from the main street. So that will be a decision that we can take, and then we can put that to the department to say, this is how we want traffic to flow through our town, and this is no different to what they did in Tanunda. Obviously, you've still got delivery vehicles which can are free to come in, but that is the starting point of improving road safety, within Kapunda.
Just going back to Councillor to what Councillor Jason mentioned, lights. Lights were considered from the very beginning of that pedestrian crossing, and I think the reason why we didn't continue with that on that pathway was the cost. I think we should reassess that and perhaps get a costing on what it would be to install the flashing lights on that crossing, because at the end of the day, that's probably the only answer we've got. The visibility, I agree with you, that can be tricky, but there's not a lot you can do. And people are going to park there, and they do, and because of the chemist shop and everything else. So the visibility bit's always going to be a little bit tricky, but the lights are probably the answer now. It might be a fairly cost budget line, but it's going to save someone's life. It's worth it. Mr. Jason?
So question from there.
Sorry,
Question from there, then how do we go about putting that so we can get a report on that maybe?
Well, I think if we could just put a question without notice, that a report be brought back to a future council meeting on the pedestrian crossing at Kapunda and the options that are available to council to consider. Something in that nature, and see what we're able to consider, and tick off on something that we think is appropriate.
Fantastic, thank you.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Councillor Dean?
Thanks, Mayor Bill. In the interim, can we repaint the lines? And also I've noticed there's only actual pedestrian crossing sign right out the crossing. There's no warning prior to that. Is that something we can do in the short term quickly? I've noticed I cross that, I make a point of crossing there actually when I cross the road if I'm anywhere near. And I of course never step out until I make sure the car's going to slow down and stop. And all the times I've crossed, there's only once when the car didn't stop, and I did glare at him, but I don't think he even noticed me. So the point is, I agree, it can be dangerous if you trust drivers to do the right thing.
That's right.
Mm. And whatever we do, we should never trust other drivers to do the right thing, whether we're driving or walking. So there is an obligation, I think, on us to do the right thing when we cross, as well as on drivers to do the right thing. But if we can do some short-term things, that once we get the bypass, well, then there are numerous other options for crossing, which might be cheaper than light and more effective, that we can do with lower speed limits and raised up bits and all that sort of stuff. But there are a lot more options, as Richard has indicated. But in the short term, if we can increase the signage and brighten up the lines, that will at least make it less likely that people won't notice it, but it won't stop the clowns who deliberately drive through.
Yep.
Nothing will.
Yeah,
Thanks, Councillor Dean.
it's true, the chair, that there are actually advanced signs, believe it.
Are there?
Yes, there are. Yeah, and I think that becomes actually the issue. I've had to look myself to make sure.
Councillor David?
Just on that, can't we get signs that say you're approaching a crossing? Like further down the street on either side?
There are two there, yeah.
Jesus, well, I don't see them.
Yeah,
So
they
they're
are
not
there.
very effective.
Oh, they're big round
You see 'em?
standard signs. Mm. Any further questions, councillors?
Thanks,
Councillor Gill?
thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is either a question or a motion without notice. It depends on your rulings. We had two very good presentations at the start of the meeting, and also the cards they presented. I would like to see a report into the concerns of the presenters of the Oscar development, discussed at or brought up and discussed at the next strategy meeting, whether that's better than the full council meeting at this stage. But I would think we ought to respond to their concerns. Whether we can do anything about them, I don't know, but I think that's what we should find out. And I think we ought to, if, as a group, we should have some sort of response to their concerns.
That your question without notice?
Well,
take that on as a question.
Yeah, and I would like to see it moved into a report. So whether you need a formal motion on that regard or not, Mr. Mayor.
No, the question without notice will be fine. No, that's fine. Anything further, councillors? Yes. Councillor Simon? Oh. No, Councillor Peter was first. Age before beauty.
Regarding the pedestrian dangers, a comment and a suggestion. Firstly, I think the comment is that I think it was very wise to for you to bring up the matter of extending the speed limit in Kapunda. Keep speed down. Now, the suggestion that I have is that there are two factors here. One is the vehicle problem, and the other is the pedestrian problem. Now, can we put some simple signs at the pedestrian crossing which warn the pedestrians? Along the lines of stop, look and listen, that sort of thing. Anyway, if it makes people hesitate, it's all for the good, and it wouldn't be very expensive, I imagine, to do it.
That's a great suggestion, and I
So
think
it's
it
just
goes
a
in line with what Councillor David and Councillor Dean were talking about. It's a bit about education. It's not just the motorists, it's the pedestrians too that sometimes just walk straight out. And so they've got to take some responsibility. So that's a very good suggestion, thank you, Councillor Peter, and I'm sure Richard will design something up there that just is quite simple, but just points out what the obligations are to the pedestrian. Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Simon?
Yes, thank you. I do have a question about the live meeting streaming, which is a bit of a pet issue of mine, as you would know. And this is the reason why I ask these sort of obvious questions, so that we all have the resolution that we all unanimously carried in front of us. So in point 3b, it says that the trial recordings being regularly reviewed for audio and visual quality by Council's Information Services staff. So I just wonder, how has that review traveled? Has there been any improvements done, or was it necessary to make improvements? Because I mean, I've watched these recordings and I thought they were quite good. And I think last recording got 11 views, which is 11 more than we usually have. So I think that's a great thing.
you make some very good points there, and I think I did ask the question earlier, and I think the sound quality of our live streaming has improved. I don't know if there's any other aspect of it that has, but and Richard might be able to probably answer that better than me. But I understand that the sound quality certainly has improved, and I think our microphones have probably had a fair bit to do with that. Richard.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Simon. Yes, you're right. We do have a review on a monthly basis of the council recording. I sit down a couple of days after the council meeting and re-listen to the whole council meeting and note the shortfalls of the recording process and so forth and so on. And yes, you're also right that as a result of that, and pretty much as a result of implementing these microphones here, the sound recording quality to the recordings has improved over time. And you'll have noted, if you do take the time to have a look at the recordings, that a lot of the muffled sort of background noise has been taken out of the recording process. So that's probably a fairly short explanation of the improvement quality there. So yes, we do have a look before they're posted, yeah, we'll continue to do that for the period of the trial.
Do you see, is there still any more improvements that need to be done, or is this as good as it's going to get?
Being a non-technical person, I would be hesitant to say one way or the other, but certainly after a review, I contact our IT staff and let them do their magic, and away we go. So we'll continue to do that. The aim, of course, is to continually improve the process as we go.
Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. Any further questions or comments, councillors? If not, we will move into our confidential section of our council meeting. Would someone like to move that way? That on motions without notice, I don't think that I addressed that. Do we have any motions without notice? No, we don't. So we can move on to our confidential section of our